Okay.
So we'll just need a motion to add her to the right off.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, is she in here?
It's item 11, so it's the last one. She's not
Okay.
here right now. I know she's.
But I don't have to do it right at the beginning. Can I do it later?
It's probably easier right now just to cover them all off.
Okay.
Do it on the item.
Okay. Okay. We're going to get started. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Which one is it here? This one. Oh, I didn't do that. Okay. Okay, so I'm calling the meeting to order, the 1 p.m. public session, and I'd ask if there's any declarations of interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, I will move to approval of the minutes. Can I have a mover of the minutes, please? Okay, Commissioner Denzelman and Wong, all those in favor? That's approved. Now we'll run through the order paper. So we have the CEO's report, and then we have our ACAT report. The item 3 we've dealt with in private session this morning, so I'll request a motion to adopt the staff recommendations. Commissioner Min and Wong. Same issue with 4 large litigation matters. I'd request a motion to adopt the staff recommendations. Okay, Commissioner Carroll. Davisville Car House Pendant Power Supply System Retrofit and Facilities Upgrade. If there's no questions on that, we could ask for a motion to adopt staff recommendations. Okay, Commissioner Lalonde is moving that. All those in favor? That carries. Russell Car House, the sand silo and the delivery system. I would ask for a motion to adopt the staff recommendations. Okay, that's Commissioner De Laurentiis, and those in favor, that carries. Subway air quality final report, I'm going to hold that in my name because I have a quick motion on that one. The support to Toronto Police Service Vehicle Mitigation Program, I think Commissioner, did any of the commissioners want to hold that item? The buses, you want to hold that? Okay. I didn't know if Commissioner Osborne wanted to hold that. Line 2, the wheel flats, we have a presentation by staff on that one, so we'll hold that one as well. And fare payments on Wheel Trans contracted sedan taxis. Anybody want to hold that item? No. To request to a motion to adopt staff recs. All those in favor, that carries. And then the new motion without notice, this is the 640 Lansdowne Avenue lease that we voted on back in September, which was altered at the last council meeting. Thank you to Commissioner Carroll for seconding that. So can we move that item, or you hold it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start off with our CEO's report for July 2019.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Good morning, or good afternoon, everyone. You know, it's been an exciting few weeks since the last time we met, and as you know, the TTC was the proud host of the APTA International Rail Rodeo and Conference just a few weeks back, with a combined total of 1,500 at the rodeo and conference. And we considered this a highly successful event, one which I'm happy to say and prompted APTA to remark that the new bar has been set by the TTC in the City of Toronto, and that the next host will have a difficult time matching the amazing event that we put on. I would like to thank the head of Customer Communications, Deb Brown, the head of Transit Control, Albert Oliver, as well as the co-chairs, Deb Lyons and Matt Brown, along with the entire special events team and everyone at Leslie Barnes who worked tirelessly to welcome competitors from all over North America as well as Japan. So thank everybody that is here. It was a terrific event. And I'm going to refrain from making any kawaii comments, but I just want to say that last month the TTC celebrated along with the rest of Toronto when the Raptors won the NBA championship, and I do have some photos as we move through this. As an integral part of the city, the TTC was proud to be involved in the planning and execution of the massive celebration that saw 1 million people take to the streets of downtown with 100,000 in 8th and Phillips Square. Aside from ensuring that we provided a good, solid operational plan to have in place, we're communicating frequently and delivered service, we also had an important role to play in keeping people safe. During the celebration on Monday, June 17th, at about 4 p.m., TTC Special Constables Tyler Murphy and Nathaniel Robb were stationed at Queens Station when they were notified that there were 2 shootings near Nathan Phillips Square, and people were now running from the area in panic. Constables Murphy and Robb observed 2 Toronto police officers attempting to arrest a suspect in front of the Ethan Center doors on Queen Street and immediately assisted the officers in the arrest. A struggle ensued, and with the help of the special constables, the suspects were safely taken into custody. Constables Murphy and Robb are to be commended for their quick actions and their continued professionalism and bravery in an uncertain and dangerous and volatile situation. So I'm going to ask Constables Murphy and Robb if they'd stand, be acknowledged by the board, and then come up and we're going to take a picture. Come up here and take a picture. Incredible force. We're very fortunate to have special constables. As I wrote in the commentary section of my report, we recently received a letter from Metrolinx about the discount double fare agreement that began in 2017. It was recently in the paper to provide discounted fares to our customers transferring from GO and Union Pearson Express, and the TTC. Under the agreement, the province subsidizes the TTC and Metrolinx's lost revenue from the reduced fares up to a cap of $18.4 million per year. In the letter, Metrolinx advised us that it now estimates that the program will exceed its financial year's provincial funding cap by up to $10 million, and as a result, funding may be exhausted as early as October of this year, well ahead of the agreement's expiration date of March 2020. We are in discussions with the city and Metrolinx, and we'll be conducting a detailed cost-benefit analysis, which we'll bring back to this board in September, at which time we will seek direction from the future of the program. And now I'm going to share with you some more good news, and you've seen this a number of times over the course of the last couple of years, and it's to show bus and streetcar short turns, and they've been now at the lowest they've been in years. And this is thanks to a concerted effort among our planning, maintenance, and operating departments, and to the fact that we've recently consolidated our transit control center with expanded policies, procedures, and oversight. I'm thrilled with these results and expect customers who aren't being asked to leave vehicles before their destination share my sentiment. What I'll also tell you now is, now that we've addressed getting short turns to really bottom out and the reliability of the fleet to increase significantly, I've tasked staff to challenge themselves to improve the on-time performance over the next 18 to 24 months for the entire streetcar and bus network. We know we have that capability with the staff, and so that's the challenge that's in place. You'll see more of that over the coming months. You may recall that in May of last year, the board endorsed an action plan to improve service on bus and subway, especially our Line 1, after a disastrous day of service on January 30th led to a near dangerous levels of crowding at Yonge and Bloor Station. I'm proud to say that the efforts paid off, and as you can see in these slides, the first slide is Yonge and Bloor Station, southbound at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Historically, we were always putting through 21, 22, 23 trains per hour. We're up to the 26, 27 train per hour time frame, and the average is significantly improved. I'll tell you that although we picked the peak of the peak for rush hour, that it's the hour and a half to 2 hours prior to this time frame for the placement locations of the vehicles that really makes this successful. So I'm really thrilled. So this is Yonge and Bloor South. We have one more, I believe, the St. George and St. George as well. So both lines 1 and 2 are seeing significant improvements in the reliability and the number of trains going through their area. So I want to thank staff for that. It's well underway. You know, on Tuesday, June 25th, TT's head of vehicle programs, Dem Case, as well as the Chief Safety Officer, John O'Grady, were proud to join colleagues from the number of the city's departments to receive a Corporate Services Cause for Applause Award for our contribution to the city's receiving a score of an A in the Carbon Disclosure Project's first ranking of 596 cities' actions to cut emissions and set climate strategies. The A score for the City of Toronto in the leadership category is among 7% of the cities worldwide and places Toronto as a global leader for an ambitious environmental policy. The TTC is truly honored to have been part of this through our Green Bus Technology Plan, in particular our new hybrids and e-buses. I'm going to touch on two personnel matters. First, I'm going to touch on the fact that over the course of the last number of years, many of you have received regular updates from Susan Sperling, who's the Executive Director for Corporate Communications and acting right now. Susan has let us know that she'll be moving on after 8 years at the TTC. She's become the Director of Communications for Northland Power. So what I just want to acknowledge Susan, thank her for her dedication and time here at the TTC, and congratulate her on her opportunity and welcome her to the best of success. You've done a great job, Susan. I'm going to give her a clap. And lastly, I'd like to welcome Josie Levita as the interim CFO. Until Josie joined us on July 2nd, Josie was the Executive Director of Financial Planning for the city. We're fortunate that she agreed to be seconded to the TTC for 12 to 24 months until a permanent recruitment process could be in place. I've worked personally with Josie over doing budgets the last number of years, so I'm confident that she can help us transition through what we know is going to be a very difficult 2020 budget process. And with that, Chair, that concludes my opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the CEO on his report? Go ahead.
Thank you. On page, sorry, I didn't realize you were going to get to me so quickly. The question about asset assessment or evaluation by the province, page 11. So a question I wanted to ask around this, I guess a couple of questions. First of all, how will we define the assets, or is that left to be decided? And what I'm interested in knowing is specifically beyond the subway assets that we would understand the province to be taking over, does that expand to support assets? And what I'm getting at is, you know, if part of this, if the reason for this assessment is to determine the extent of financial support that is required over time to maintain those assets, would we not also want to ensure that any support elements that go to support those assets or those assets are dependent upon are also included, so that they would also be included in the financing considerations?
Okay, through you, Chair. Let me answer the question this way. So the upload in a whole has been separated into two different segments. The first is the expansion part of it, and then it was the upload of the existing assets. All right, so in each area, the city has taken the lead in the discussions. I'm at the table with them, and what they've told us as of now is we're focusing primarily on the expansion, but the determination of the expansion is the operating and how we're going to maintain the 3 lines that we have in place today. And when it comes to the asset evaluation, that's a discussion that's just about to begin. We don't have all full details. We do know that there's 14 individuals that they've asked us to come in and train. They've laid out all the locations that they're looking to observe. They want to walk our tunnels, see our bridges, our track, our power systems, go through our yards. But as for specifics, Joe Fragg from the city is still working with them on determining how are they determining the value of our assets and what goes along with what assets they're looking for.
So if I may have a supplementary to that. So I guess then would we not want to, from a board perspective, I guess I'm interested in making sure that we would be party to that assessment, because longer term, we would not want to be in a position where the TTC and the city, for that matter, would need to assume certain costs that are really related to an asset that is owned by the province. And so should we not ensure that we have our own independent third party who's also part of that asset assessment? And
The city has taken the lead on that. That is correct. We are doing that.
Other questions? Commissioner Lalonde.
Yeah, Rick, you mentioned that we closed a few subway stations during the Raptor celebration. I assume that was for overcrowding, safety issues. How do we deal with that? Are there ways that we can keep the stations open and just limit access to the stations? Or can you talk about, the process we use to close down a station?
Absolutely. Through you again, Chair. We staffed all the stations with staff that have the ability to notify us immediately on the crowding in the stations. And it actually starts that you have to bypass the stations because you can't drop any more customers on the platform to exit the station. That's where it gets very dangerous from a health and safety standpoint. So we close the stations because we can't get people out to the street. And it was Dundas and Queen, for instance, initially. And then later on in the evening, when we clear the stations and we keep them closed, we do that working with the police department. It's a means of dispersing the public, having to walk north and south to get to the stations. And we opened it, I believe it was about 2 hours later. I'll look at Jim Ross in that sense, to keep people moving so they don't stay in that station in that area.
Commissioner Bradford's next.
Quick follow-up on the Raptors item. Now that you're in Toronto, are you a Celts fan or are you on board with the Raptors?
Oh, important answer.
I'm a Toronto fan.
Well done. Well done. In this room, Commissioner Carroll, maybe you have a serious question?
I have a serious question. It's about the double discounted fare. I'm wondering if it's out of brevity here in the report. It just talks about, and this will cause us pressure. I don't see a program of activism to get the province to figure out how they're going to fund it 12 months of the year in years going forward, because this could be a huge problem for us and basically takes our whole fare ratio and upends it, because we basically, if we start to have to fund this in the millions, we're subsidizing every ride more than we were before.
That's correct, through the chair. Again, we know that it's about $4 million worth of subsidy need just for the last 3 months of this year. And it's about 14.
That's a current ridership.
That's a current, and 14 million for next year. That's where we're actively in discussions with the
So
city
like
now on
any
that.
ride, the more this happens, the more it grows, and we got a growing problem. But I don't see a statement in here from Metrolinx or us that says we are marching up the hill to explain to them that they need to sustain the double discount fare program for 12 months of the year in real numbers. Is that advocacy going on?
I can tell you, in having meetings with Chris Murray at the city, he's addressing funding needs with the provinces.
So it's now.
This was to him and I at the same time.
It's now on their list of asks that happens weekly.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on the CEO's report? Any other? Okay, so I guess we'll move, someone could move to accept the CEO's report. Okay, Commissioner Lalonde, all those in favor? That carries. And I just want to take a minute to just recognize our CEO, because I don't know if you're aware that he's hit the 5-year anniversary pin, and the TTC likes to celebrate these moments. Whether you like it or not, Rick. Is he rolling his eyes? Can you roll your eyes? So it's actually it's belated happy 5-year anniversary with the TTC. Here's his beautiful pin that he's receiving today because he's stuck with us 5 years. And it was actually, as I said, in April, but you were dealing with other medical matters at the time, and we're glad you're back and your eyesight's intact. So we just want to thank you, Rick, for your steadfast, loyal service to the TTC, and all that encompasses the board, the 15,000 employees, the customers we serve, and more broadly, the people of Toronto. So we wish you continued success and, of course, excellent health. Congratulations. Okay, and I also just want to say quickly on behalf of the board, just recognize and appreciate Susan Sperling. Many of you know Susan because of her timely communications on critical issues and keeping us up to date as things unfold. So Susan, again to you, on behalf of the board, the TTC Commission, thank you so much for your service, your commitment, and all those amazing communications that really kept us up to speed at a time when it was critical. Also, on behalf of the board, I would also like to welcome Josie Lavida. Basically, the CEO has done that, but we're very pleased you're our new CFO. We are going to benefit greatly, I know, from your expertise, years of expertise, and your years of municipal experience. So we couldn't be happier that you're part of the new, you're our new addition to the TTC team. And welcome aboard, and we look forward to working with you. All right, we're going to now move into the agenda. And at this time, I would like to invite Mazen forward. Is he? Oh, there. Oh, my gosh. You're magic. You just popped up there. All right. You're very effective and efficient, Mazen, so you can go ahead and present your minutes.
Try to save some time.
Yes, you're good.
Good afternoon, everyone. Here's the highlights for ACAT May 30th meeting. At the ACAT Communications Subcommittee, travel training for Wheel-Trans customers using Family of Service was discussed. Since Family of Service has been encouraged as a main mode of travel for conditional Wheel-Trans customers, it is anticipated that travel training will become more in demand. As a way of dealing with this influx, it was suggested that some customers could benefit from viewing a series of small videos on using conventional system. Another suggestion was to create an online booking profile which could help caregivers for those with memory difficulties. At the ACAT Design Review Subcommittee, DRS, an update was provided on the current plans for accessibility modifications to Greenwood Station by 2023. DRS raised concerns about the lack of a sufficient lobby space from the concourse to the westbound platform elevator at concourse level, and the narrow corridor and lobby space at platform level. Committee members requested that the corridor be enlarged so the customers with larger mobility devices could turn around inside the corridor instead of having to back out onto the platform. DRS members also recommended that there is a side access to the elevator hall call button. As TTC is currently preparing specification documents for the next order of low-floor streetcars, DRS members were asked for feedback with the current low-floor streetcars. Subcommittee members' comments included the ramp angle, mobility device seating areas, and overall passenger circulation in the vehicle. DRS members received an update to the streetcar platform design. Changes per DRS recommendation include railing improvements for cane detectability, platform end barrier, and tactile attention indicators at the ramp. There is an outstanding item regarding lighting that requires agreement with Toronto Hydro. A concern was raised that not all platforms are adequate dimensions for people with mobility devices boarding and deboarding. The TTC is aware of such constraint. There are a number of right-of-way challenges, especially in older parts of the city. Mosaic Transit and Metrolinx presented 30% designs for Finch West LRT surface stops. DRS members recommended moving the accessible pedestrian signal push button from where it was shown on the drawings to a more accessible location. Revising tactile guidance paths to only provide these in the open areas of island platforms, not where shelters are provided, and not providing these on site platforms. DRS members raised concern that the new Shepherd Center third-party elevator control panel is on an end wall beside the door, not on the side wall as per TTC requirements. It's the same scenario like St. Patrick. At the ACAT Service Planning Subcommittee, SPS, a senior transportation planner from the City of Toronto provided a draft overview of transportation policies consisting of accessibility, transit, cycling, and automated vehicles and shared mobility services. The definition of accessibility is an issue due context and different meanings. There was a discussion regarding traffic signals in predominantly senior areas and the new senior crossing zone signs installed by the city. The confusion being that people pushing the button believe it is for a change of light signal, when in fact it is an audible sound for people with impaired vision crossing lights. There was a lengthy discussion about cycling issues and the interference of bike lanes with wheel-trans passengers, safety of drivers and bike riders. There was also a discussion of the access hub connections to future Finch LRT stops and the concern over excessive walking in proposal for new bus terminals. This led to a discussion for consistency in accessible public transit. ACAT Wheel-Trans Operations Subcommittee reviewed an overview of the new mobile app, which would allow Wheel-Trans customers to manage their rides through their touch-tone phones. The app will have the same features as the online Wheel-Trans self-booking website. Some features include estimated time arrival, ETA, for rides, to know where their rides is, allow riders to reset their password, indicate if there are any service alerts along the way, and allow riders to access their trip history. The app is scheduled to go live in August 2019. Wheel-Trans Operations Subcommittee members recommended that app be launched once it is fully developed and not at an incremental stages of development in order to avoid confusion and frustration for riders. And finally, the 2019 ACAT information session for 2020 membership recruitment will be held on the following dates: July 26, 2019, Friday, 2 p.m. to 3:30 at City Hall, Committee Room 2, this room, and July 31st, Wednesday, 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at City Hall, Committee Room 1. Our next ACAT meeting, to which you are all invited, it's Thursday, August 29th at 1900 Yonge, 7th floor boardroom from 1 to 3:30. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? There's questions for staff. Okay. Thank you very much. So questions for staff on this item. Commissioner Carroll.
Yeah, just a quick question. On the development of the design, well, I guess the first one, the Greenwood station is, I guess, the best example of it. It seems like a fairly basic thing, that the hallway is wide enough and the lobby area didn't have enough for radius for devices. That seems like a basic design spec. So when ACAT brings something like that forward, I'm assuming that you adjust those plans, but does that also, do we then also adapt our basic design specifications for any station?
And through the chair, yes, we do. And we take all of our designs for easier access to ACAT early on. They are the experts in removing barriers, and some things are obvious, and we do our best to get all of the obvious ones. And some of the things we learn as we go. And so we always incorporate their advice into our designs, so that when we get further along, it's acceptable.
Right, so that hallway width, for instance, would then become, the next time you're tendering at a station, you'd be looking at that spec.
Yes, we would we have a continuous lessons learned process that we use, and we would be looking at that. But sometimes it's a configuration, sometimes there's structural or utilities in the way, and we do our best. But in this case, it sounds like it's just not acceptable, and the design work needs to be redone.
Right, okay.
Or modified.
Thanks. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Again, thank you to our presenter, and I request a motion to receive the ACAT minutes. Commissioner Bradford, all those in favor? That carries. Okay, now we'll jump down to item 7, which is the subway air quality final report. I held that item. I just had a quick question to staff on what is the outcome of your analysis and your assessment?
Well, the outcome at the moment, this should really, Madam Chair, be seen as an interim report.
Okay.
What this report tells you is that the air quality in the subway meets all regulatory requirements under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. The second aspect of this is that there are no comparable regulations for air quality governing exposure to customers. And so we've engaged Toronto Public Health, and I'll recognize Gail Bursey and Stephanie Gower, who are here from Toronto Public Health. TDC has engaged them to help us do a health risk assessment based on this numeric data of exposure, and they have been in consultation with an expert panel, and they intend to report back to us at the end of the year or early first quarter of next year as to what this all means. So right now we have a bunch of numbers that say everything's good. We want to know what's the impact on health and compare the exposure to whatever contaminants there are in the subway against the health benefits of having public transit, starting with every trip begins and ends with a walk, which is good for the health of the commuter, but also the displacement of all the CO2 producing vehicles that transit represents with an electric fired fleet.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions, Commissioner Carroll and then Bradford?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the cost of it. Because these are the kinds of things where in executive summary, the public can jump to conclusions. So we've spent $825,000 on arriving at these conclusions. And then it says the public health assessment was $100,000. Is that because they basically used our data to do their study? How is it we
yes.
spent $801?
Yes, they are. We did all the data collection, which was the biggest part of the study. They are now doing the scientific analysis on the implications of that data. And I just introduced Stephanie Fortin, the manager of Occupational Health and Safety, and I'd like to recognize Virgil Umali in the front row here. He was the project manager for this massive study as well. So I don't know if you want to add anything, Stephanie.
Present. Yeah, so because we were asked to use consultants, we used 2 different consultants and the lab analysis, so the cost is with the third-party consultants. So they are taking our data and then running that through their health assessment.
Oh,
Yeah.
And the 2019, that's not over, that's part of 925.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bradford?
Thanks very much. Through the chair, the report cites 2 instances where the samples exceeded the applicable occupational exposure limit. Were either of these activities taking place during typical operational hours of the TTC?
Madam Fortin?
Yes, so we measured maintenance activities that occurred during revenue service. And this particular crew was a structure maintenance crew working at Bay Lower during revenue service. So we wanted to capture their effect on revenue service. So they were doing like concrete chipping at Bay Lower. So not exactly in the main path of the subway, but they were during revenue service. So that's why we chose to.
If there are, if these operations are taking place typically during operating hours, do we have measures in place that would protect consumers or passengers?
So they are expected to follow good dust control practices, which we later found out they didn't do particularly during this day, so that's where we kind of got a bit higher than we normally get. But as a result of this, we reiterated their dust control practices with wetting or vacuuming debris up to minimize dust that's getting into the subway.
That was my follow-up question was they were doing dry cutting, and do we know why that took place, dry cutting versus wet cutting, and if we've addressed that going forward?
We have addressed it in their report specifically, yes.
Okay.
And reiterating our expectations with good dust control practices.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff? I'll move to speakers. Any speakers? I'll speak very quickly and have just a little motion. I just want to thank staff for following up on this, and of course, thank our friends in public health for your support through this process. And my motion is simply this, that I just want to ensure as we go through this process, it's being communicated to the TTC employees, because often things are discussed here or with senior management, and it's not really being brought to the attention to the TTC employees. So it seems like we're going in a good direction here. There's some good news, and hopefully will be more as we complete this full analysis. But I want to make sure through our internal communication channels that all TTC employees are aware of these findings and outcomes. So that's my motion, and thank you to staff for your report. I would ask, I guess we'll start with this motion as an amendment. So all those in favor, opposed, that carries. And then a request to approve the report recommendations. Somebody want to move that? I guess, okay. Commissioner Osborne will move that. Thank you. And all those in favor, that carries. Okay, next item is item 8, support to Toronto Police Service vehicle mitigation. So that was held. Questions for staff? Is there any questions for staff? Speakers on this item? Do you want a presentation? No, I want to move the staff report. Oh, that's it. Okay, so we have a mover. Any other comments or questioners of the mover? Okay, Commissioner Osborne would like to speak on that.
Yeah, I just have a comment. Being relatively new here, I found a couple of things have cropped up that this is probably the smallest one that we've encountered, where we have these left pocket, right pocket transactions. The police are our good friends. This is all one city. It's just, the question is, when we get to much more substantial numbers, is how the business itself looks on paper. So there's the movement of the money, and then there's the recording of same, so that you get an accurate picture of what the business looks like. And so at this point, given the size of this TTC budget, this is pretty much a rounding error. I mean, it's not a material sum of money. It gets more interesting when it is a material sum of money, and you don't, what ends up happening is the subsidy that the TTC needs from the city looks bigger than it is, or stuff starts to look a little wonky. And this may be the way it's always been done, and that's how it happens, but it doesn't get a completely accurate picture when it's taken to a much higher level.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. That's helpful. And certainly the CEO was listening to your feedback. So thank you for that. Commissioner Min Wong has moved the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Item 9, we have a presentation, so I'll ask Rich Wong to come forward, our Chief Vehicle Officer. And his, I don't know if Ford is also going to be presenting, our Chief Infrastructure and Engineering Chief of. So thank you, welcome, and my understanding is you have a short presentation on this item.
To the Madam Chair, yes, we have a short presentation. What I'm going to do is I'll go through it. Ford is up here to answer any questions related to infrastructure afterwards. I'm here for the vehicle side, and we also have Diego Sinagoga here to answer any questions related to community affairs, if you so happen to have some of those types of questions. So what I'll do now, if you're okay, I'm just going to quickly run through it, and then we'll answer questions right after that. So we have about 18 slides, and they're pretty simple. What is a wheel flat? Just to tell you what a wheel flat is, a wheel flat is basically a flat on a round steel wheel. And what you hear is a thumping sound, and the larger the flat, the greater the thumping sound, and the greater the vibration you'll feel in the rails. Wheel flats are expected in the rail industry. It's common. In TTC, our average backlog of wheel flats waiting for maintenance is about 15 cars at any given time. Wheel flats are more prevalent in the autumn season. We usually see a little bit of a spike, and that's because basically you have the foliage coming off the trees, and there's natural oil in there, and it gets seeped into the rail. So we see a little bit of a spike in there. It's about 30 cars in our backlog at any given time in autumn. But what happened in October and November is we saw that seasonal spike, but that seasonal spike went beyond what we were used to. And usually we have 45 trains in service, and then in October, by the end of October, 90% of our fleet had moderate to severe flats. So given that, we had to actually put cars out there with moderate to severe flats, and that created an impact to this community. So starting in October 2018, we saw this extraordinary increase in subway noise and vibration, and the complaints were received all along Line 2. And it was not so specific to any one location of the network, and it was the prominent source of complaints. It was not the prominent source of complaints prior to October, but it was moving forward from that month on. 6 wards were affected by this. As I said, it went all the way from the west end to the east end of the city, and we received more than 200 complaints by affected residents. When this started to happen, some of the residents welcomed or requested TTC's staff to come out and observe what they were seeing in their house. We communicated information that we knew at the time, and we posted on the TTC website. We also included a fact sheet, which we posted online about what wheel flats are. And we also provided updates to residents and local councilors on a regular basis. We did go out there and we did a few town halls to any community that wanted it. So just a little bit of technical matters here. So what causes a wheel flat? Basically, it's low traction and emergency braking application. If you have that combination, you're going to get a wheel flat. And what happens is that the wheel locks up and then you get that metal on metal sliding action, which will cause that flat. Causes of low traction, usually wet rail, leaves, snow, and then if you can have some over lubrication on the rail. So on the rail, we use what we call our lubricators. They apply a small amount of grease, and that's to combat wheel squeal, which is opposite of wheel flats and the thumping sound that you get. Too much grease will cause flats, and too little grease will cause wheel squeal. So you have to find that right balance. Causes of emergency braking, it could be operator induced or it could be induced by our speed control system. We have a speed control system and it was implemented as a result of that Russell Hill accident way back when. What the speed control system does is that it prevents spin slide. It watches for overspeed. So if an operator is speeding in a certain section, it'll apply emergency braking. And it also looks for signal violations. And if there is a signal violation, it'll apply that emergency brake as well. We do have a wheel flat detection system. It's really, it's an early warning detection system. It's called Aura. It's located between Warden and Kennedy on the westbound side. We only have one of them on line 1. We also have, or line 2. We also have one on line 1 as well. What it does, it detects the vibration as the train passes through it, and it gauges it, and it tells you if you have a flat or not. And then it ranks it in terms of color coding, red being the most severe flat. And then it gives, just on the slide there, it gives you a report, and it shows you the train and all the different axles, and then it starts color coding those axles according to what it ranks as a minor, moderate, or severe flat. So again, red up there shows you it's a major flat. How we repair wheel flats, if you've visited any of the car houses, we have a wheel turning machine, and basically it's basically a big lathe. If you've taken machine shop, it shaves the wheel, and little shavings come off, and it returns the wheel back to round. A new wheel is about 28 inches in diameter, and you can machine it down to about 25 and 3/8 of an inch before you have to throw that wheel out. On line 1, we see an average wheel life about 4 years. And so on the subway, we have 2 wheel turning machines, one at Greenwood Car House for line 2 and one at Wilson Car House for line 1. So when this problem started to happen, we did start the investigation right away at the end of October and November, and then we really got into a bigger investigation commencing in January, and that's when we started to bring on external help, which we had the National Research Council of Canada help us, and they were the lead investigators. This investigation was really multidisciplinary. It required 3 departments because this was really a vehicle to track to operator interface, and then it could, this problem could be a contribution from all 3 areas or one area in particular. So rail cars and shops, subway infrastructure, and then subway transportation were all involved in this investigation with NRCC as the lead investigator. The investigator really was data-driven. It also included inspection of our assets, and then we went through a process of elimination trying to figure out if there was a major contributor there. On the vehicle side, we looked at the wheels, we looked at brake pads. We also tested the acceleration and brake rates of the vehicle. We reviewed the data for any propulsion faults and the data for where we were thinking that there was specific EB applications or emergency brake applications that may have been a major factor in this. On the track side, they did something similar. They looked at the rail, the wayside lubricators, and then they also looked at the speed control system. Some action items coming out of this. From the vehicle side of things, we looked at the data for EB braking, and we now are looking at redesigning the master controller so that what happens is the operator can forcefully put it into emergency brake if they're a little bit too hard with the force. So we're looking at redesigning that so it makes it a little bit tougher to put in the EB by mistake. We also started to replace some of the brake pads. We did change the brake pads in recent years, and we're now going back to the original brake pads. And we're also looking at introducing new vibration sensors on the bogies and trucks, and that's just to collect more data so that we can analyze it. Again, the Aura system will pick up flats, but it only picks it up in the east end. So if we travel the line, we can't really locate where these flats are happening. So these mobile vibration sensors on the truck, we're hoping that will help it out as we go forward. On the track side of things, some action items that came out of the investigation, well, we started cleaning the rail. We turned off the lubricators. This was to eliminate grease as one of the significant contributors to this. We also started testing top of rail friction modifiers. We added speed control system tags and unequipped mode tags. If you need, Fort can explain that after we just finished this presentation. And then we also implemented some restricted speed zones so that we'd go through the open cuts a little bit slower. And then in inclement weather, we're not sliding as much in those areas. On the transportation side, we had supervisors go out and do audits on how the operators were operating the train. And then we also had operator reminder campaigns where, we would remind them, best operating techniques on acceleration and deceleration of the vehicles going into stations. Other things we've done here is we went out to pair agencies to find out if they've had similar experiences like this. They've all said more or less that they see the seasonal effects of wheel flats, but they haven't seen a huge spike like we had in such a short period of time. And then towards the end of this investigation around May of this year, we also went out and hired Network Rail, which is more or less an operator as well as just like our agency, and to assist us in the investigation. Some of the results here. So we've noticed after applying some of those action items, some of the emergency brake applications were monitored and reduced by this in some areas of the speed control. And subway infrastructure is now investigating potential improvements to the software program. This pie chart here just shows you what it shows you is different codes for the speed control system. So if you go down to the bottom there's a code for overspeed. So it's looking for a train that's speeding, and then it will throw it in an emergency. So 13%. The speed control system at this point in time in April 2019 saw 13% of the trains speeding. There was 1% of signal violation, and then there's about 50% of loss of traction. After all those action items were implemented, we saw a steady decrease in the number of wheel flats. Like I said, 90% of the fleet had wheel flats around October, November of 2018. As of last week, we had 16 cars with wheel flats, and today I believe the car count is 14. So we are now back down to normal levels. Actually, if we go below this, then we're actually in really good shape because the average we see is about 15 cars in our backlog. There are also no trains in service with any moderate or severe flats. Again, wheel flats are common and they're always developing. The trick is to take them off the line before they get to moderate or severe, and that's that's through preventive maintenance. The second last slide here, as we saw less and less wheel flats on the line, this meant that the vibration on the line went down as well. So we do monitor vibration on the rail, and you can see here we had a little bit of a spike in March, but then it slowly went down again, and I think we're back down to normal levels there. The number of community complaints. So again, we had about 200 of these complaints, and the greatest number were in October and November. They've slowly went down. Again, you see a spike in March, and we can explain that spike in March. What happened was there was a lot of complaints now coming in about wheel squeal. So we went out there, and instead of turning the greasers on, because we were going through this process of trying to eliminate everything, we actually hand greased, and we got a little bit too overzealous, and we applied too much grease, and that's where you see the spike again. So the action plan moving forward, we're going to continue with those action items we've already put into place. NRCC provided, NRCC provided 13 recommendations, and we're evaluating some of those recommended actions. And we're going to continue investigating potential design improvements to both the master controller system and the speed control system. So, sorry, that's it. We can take any questions.
Great, thank you for your presentation. I know Commissioner Bradford has questions.
Thanks very much. Through the chair, thank you all for your work on this. It's been a heavy lift and definitely something that impacts a lot of residents along Line 2, so I appreciate that. Could you just explain for me briefly how speed control software and tags will prevent emergency brake activation?
So through the chair, it doesn't necessarily going to prevent emergency brake applications, but one of the biggest pieces of information you get from that chart is that there's a positional certainty. Where 50% of the times an emergency brake comes on, it's because the system isn't exactly sure where the train is. Now let me just back that up a little bit. They're saying that it is a tag-based system. So what it does is when it passes a tag, it expects the train to arrive at the next tag within a certain period of time, plus or minus some tolerance. When it doesn't see it, or if it sees it too soon, it gets nervous and says, wait a second, you're not where you're supposed to be. So if you add more tags, it will just basically allow that distance to be a lot shorter, and the system itself will have a lot more confidence because there'll be more tags out there reading it. So we would anticipate when we do that the positional certainty of the train will actually increase, and the system will be, so even if you have a bit of a spin slide, you have more tags out there that are reading, so your positional certainty should go up.
With respect to communicating this to the public, mentioned that we've had open houses on wheel flats. When were those?
Through the chair, I believe it was end of March. We went out actually to the High Park area. We went to visit a resident in their house, and there was a bunch of residents that met at this one person's house. We also went out to the Dufferin area, and we had a town hall there as well. We did offer to go back again in early June to the Dufferin area, and I'll let Diego to speak to that, but I think the feedback from the Councillor Bayo at the time was that all is well, and right now we're not really needing another one. So, but Diego, do you want to comment on that?
They were basically by invitation. They requested our attendance, and we accommodated their request. And we addressed their concerns as best as possible and came back with working on the issue as well. We did follow up with the residents who were there with respect to the most recent update in terms of wheel flats, that there was a downward trend.
Okay, so we have 13 recommendations from the NRCC. How many of those have we actioned on so far? I saw that we're going to be exploring more. And how have we actually implemented any of them?
So through the chair, yes. I mean, we've actually started. One of the big things that we've looked at is the friction rail modifier is a non-grease-based type of system where it actually shoots or actually puts a lubricant on that is not greased. It's more water-based, but it puts it on the top of the rail. So there you have to be a little bit careful because your traditional grease lubricant applies it to the gauge face of the rail. So in this particular case, we are doing testing on that, but we've already have one installed at Islington with really, really good results. We also have one that we've installed for the last 2 years in the yard at Kiel. So we're taking that journey, but we do want to test it because we want to be really careful what we put on the top of the rail, because obviously if you put too much of anything on the top of the rail, you're potentially messing around with the braking rate. One of the other things we're also doing is a lot of our gauge face lubricators are well past their life cycle. So just as of this past, or 2 weekends ago, we replaced one of the older ones. So we're on a journey right now to replace every single one of our lubricators, and by the end of 2021, we'll be very confident we'll be able to do that. We've actually accelerated. We were originally going to do about 12 this year, and we're on target to do 18, I believe.
Okay, that's good. So it sounds like I think there's a lot of really good work that's been done here. I think we should be communicating that with the public, given that we have had so many complaints on this, and we should demonstrate as a TTC, we are taking action, we have this report, and it's great that you had one town hall based on a request, but perhaps we could do something for everybody across Line 2 or in a more inclusive format. So Is that something that you guys would be open to, sharing this information and all the great work you've done?
We can certainly do that, and I just wanted to add to that the list of recommendations here. So we're evaluating the feasibility, because the National Research Council, a lot of this is very theoretical, so some of them may not be practical at the same time.
Absolutely. Yep, understood. Thanks very much.
Other questions for staff? Commissioner Lalonde?
Yeah, I'm sure this is naive because I don't know how these things work, but could you handle a spike by just having more spares? Like when you grind these things, you take them off the train to grind them, or do you grind them all?
No, so when the wheel turn, it basically, the whole train goes on the wheel turn machine, and you machine the entire axle on the train.
Okay,
So what we did was we supplemented that as well, but that has its limits as well. We had spare axles, and we changed out axles. At the peak of this, we were machining plus changing out axles, but changing an axle takes about 4 to 6 hours.
Right.
Whereas when you machine it, it's a less, you can get more machine done in the same time of changing out an axle.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, speakers on this item. Thank you for your presentation. Oh, go ahead. Yes, I assumed you would speak.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bradford, go ahead.
Thanks very much. And again, big thanks to our staff and the TTC for all the work that you've done on this file. And I do appreciate it because we benefited from having you come out and meet with some individual homeowners and listen to the noise associated with wheel flats. And I think that's pretty tremendous customer service to have you coming in and sitting down with folks in their living rooms. I do have a motion here that will be going up on the screen. And basically, it's just to direct staff to host at least one information session and public consultation on the actions taken to date and the proposed next steps. It could be a series of boards. It could be the deck that you just shared. But I know at my community meetings, this is an issue that persists. It's something that we still hear about, and I think communicating the great work that has been undertaken to date is something that will be really important for residents. So whether that's in our area or somewhere more central, either way, I would suggest a long line too. But have that meeting and make sure we get the word out. And then the other piece is just to come back Q1 2020, make sure that we're on top of this file, the status of the number of wheel flats on line 2 as it relates to the overall trends, the results, conclusions, and the lessons learned from our investigation here, and the findings and the feedback that we hear from the community as part of that public consultation for those living in proximity to line 2, incorporating that into the report as well. So again, thank you very much for your work on this file, and it's something that we can continue to do going forward.
Thank you. Other speakers on this item? In that case, we'll look at the motion on the screen before us and vote on that first. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. And on the item before us, all those for it? I don't think there's anybody. Well, we are opposed, actually, to this noise, but okay, sounds like we're working at this issue diligently. Our last item today is item 11. It's a motion without notice. It's 640 Lansdowne Avenue lease, and it's a license submitted by myself and seconded by Commissioner Shelley Carroll. We have a request from the local councillor, Councillor Anna Bailao would like to speak on this item. So do I have a motion? Can I put forward a motion to Commissioner McKelvey is moving to add her to the speakers list for item 11. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. You can start now.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioners. I am the local councillor at 640 Lansdowne, and I've been working on this site for 9 years. This was a site that was under a lot of legal issues because of contaminations from General Electric. A few years ago, a settlement was settled. TTC was reimbursed all the legal costs, and there was some money for cleanup costs. And there was indemnification given to the TTC and to the first thereafter owner of the site. Fast forward about 4 years ago, Councillor Mayor Tory and I actually designated this property because this has been as a surplus property for many, many years as part of the TTC. And so we designated this property as an open door property for housing. So RFPs went out, a nonprofit housing provider has been allocated, a long-term care home is going to be built, a park is going to be built. Because of the indemnification issue, we did not transfer the property from the TTC to the city as is regularly done because we didn't want to lose that indemnification. And at the end of the day, the city is the city, but everybody understood this was going to be a housing site and so on. Park this issue. Metrolinx is building a 1.5 kilometer, 8 meters high through my community. We fought it hard. The settlement was that we were going to get all kinds of public realm improvements under this bridge. New government comes in, public realm improvements are all left. Metrolinx comes to the city and says, we want to lease this part of this property. Obviously, my community says, Councillor, these people are taking everything away from us, they're going to make our lives hell, and all we're going to be left over is 1.5 kilometer bridge up in the height, 8 meters high. I said, guys, this is a housing site. We're going to have some affordable housing here. We're going to have some long-term care and a park. Let's just make sure that the money that is coming from their lease, yes, there's going to be a lot of construction. Yes, we're left with this bridge, but at least the money of that lease goes on to the site and it's spent in there. The lease comes and it's circulated. I got circulated last month. I said, I will not approve this lease on the site if the money doesn't go to that community that is going through all the construction, that is left with the 1.5 kilometers. And that, 4 years ago, this site was done by the city as a housing site. So the only reason why it's still under the purview of the TTC is because of a legal matter, so that the city as a whole does not lose that indemnification to the future owner. So I am here to ask that, yes, if there's any costs associated with any moving of any stuff, that the TCC gets covered, but that this community gets the benefits of that lease, because even the nonprofit housing, we had to accommodate the construction to be done in cooperation with Metrolinx so that everything could work, so that the nonprofit could proceed with some of the construction, they could lease, and we at least get some benefits as a community. So I ask to support. I know that Councillor McKelvey would be moving an amendment. I ask you to support that so that the TTC, if there's any cost, is made whole. But at the end of the day, if we had moved this property 4 years ago as part of the open door, you would not be in this situation. You would not be approving this. This is not money that you're losing. This property would not even be in your hands.
Okay, I have a question for the deputant. So are you aware that all parties, including City Real Estate Services and Create TO, all the parties involved in this, agreed that the TTC should receive the license fee from Metrolinx? And that this body voted on that in February, including Councillor McKelvey, on that item, because the TTC, it is title land and the TTC is giving it up, but are you aware that there are costs involved for the TTC in facilitating this, including the moving, storage, equipment, and so that's why this body voted on that in February.
Madam Chair, I don't believe the community was consulted on that. I believe that as a representative of that community, when this was circulated to me, I made myself aware saying that I would not support this. And I don't think any of those organizations actually had this conversation with the community at large. And all I'm asking, again, if there's any costs about the moving or anything, let's reimburse them, but that this property would not even be in your hands anymore if we had actually moved it, and we didn't move it because of the indemnification clause.
So I don't think we're questioning the title, but what was agreed upon by all the parties that have been part, as you've identified for, this has gone on for years. I was a bit nervous when we were giving up land, but this seems like it's a good use. The issue is that it was agreed upon by all parties to ensure that the TTC was compensated for costs.
Yep, and that's what Councillor McKelvey's motion will say. And like I said, Madam Chair, yes, you voted on this in February, and I'm making the plea to you to vote on it again, taking into consideration all these facts that I'm presenting right here to you.
Yeah, so here, a part of our problem is, as you know, is some of this is confidential, and so we can't speak about numbers and amounts. But the TTC didn't identify an amount.
It's a matter of principle, I believe, more than the amounts. I think that's...
No, I'd like to finish, please. So what I'm asking you is, there was, some of this, as you know, just for the purpose of the audience, is confidential. The numbers are confidential, so we can't speak to the numbers. But the amount that was identified as part of the terms of the license were the costs associated with facilitating the changes and movement on this site.
Madam Chair,
That's what the
I just
TTC, so
question
are
if
you
anybody
aware of
has
that?
seen the site. The site sits empty right now. Sometimes they store some TTC trucks and illegally store snow in there that the city had actually tell them that they can't be storing snow because the site is not appropriately prepared to have the snow and the salt that was installed in there, and I believe that was stopped a little while ago. But the site sits empty.
So did you read the report that came to the TTC board in February?
No, I didn't read the report, like I
I think
said.
that would be helpful. Commissioner Carroll, if you could speak next.
Yeah, well, actually, it's questions.
Okay.
Of the day.
Go ahead. Yes, that's what I meant. That's what I actually meant. Sorry.
You wouldn't have read the report because the in-camera part of the report wouldn't have been available to you, not being a commissioner. But can we agree that the matter of principle there actually is gray area in the matter of principle? Because if we move this in February, your community conversations subsequent to that are conversations about money that wasn't yours to give. There is a problem within the matter of principle. I'm wondering if you would consider it a friendly amendment that while we reopen it to clear up the gray area, that we actually, so that we don't as a board of directors make an expensive real estate mistake or change terms in a way that sets a bad precedent, that we maybe reopen it but refer it back to staff so that we can figure out an agreement and bring it back here and let this board of directors adopt it. Because it came here in February and we took ownership, we've got to adopt something for this to actually be real. Council actually was moving a motion that wasn't really theirs to move at the point they did, but I don't think they were aware of the disposition because it was a confidential item here.
So I believe that Metrolinx needs to get into the site sooner rather than later. And I think that is important. I mean, I have to get back to my community. They're all under the assumption that some benefit was going to go to the community. I think that we can go over the costs of the TTC. Again, the costs are the costs, and I want to make sure that the TTC covers any costs. So if you are able to have the costs coming back, but
well, I don't think it stops Metrolinx from proceeding because it's simply a matter of in terms of
I think my
revenue,
community
who they
would
write
have,
the check to, but they can begin their action.
I think my community and I would have great opposition
to waiting a month.
To having them proceed with anything that we don't know the terms. That we don't know the terms. Yes.
So if we had it coming back to the very next meeting, could it wait that long?
I mean, I'm not sure if you can ask staff what the costs are. Do they know what the costs are?
Yeah. Well, we
can't see the amount in public.
Yeah. In order to talk numbers, we're going to end up having to go in camera. Yeah. That's why I'm suggesting that, which then excludes you from the conversation as a local council. That's why I'm asking that if we refer it back to staff, that may be a better way to resolve the issue. But we would have to reopen it as the chair has before us in order to refer anything back to them. It's just, we're going to ask staff these same questions. I just thought I'd ask you how you felt about that.
I think the Councillor McKelvey's motion addressed.
Okay.
Because it made
No,
this,
it doesn't, because we'd have to reopen the item. Commissioner Heisey?
I did have a point of order because I need to understand procedurally how to do this. I will support the motion if it's properly in front of us. But I know we need 3/4 of the board to reopen. I need to understand procedurally from the clerk what the rules are around how we do that, because it hasn't happened here much. So okay, you go ahead.
Through the chair, I was just conversing with legal on this item.
Okay.
So there may be an opportunity for a further staff report. I'm not sure if our legal counsel is able to speak to that.
So our recommendation would be that staff report back at the September meeting. That way it avoids the whole issue of a reconsideration. Staff could bring back a report with a recommendation to deal with this whole thing with figures and so forth.
I'm fine with the recommendation. I don't want you to be shy about answering the procedural question. So if we were inclined to do this, can we procedurally do it, and how does it need to be done? What's involved? So we have a notice of motion.
So as of the moment, you cannot procedurally do this. So there is no notice of motion in front of the board. There is no notice without motion in front of the board, which would have to be served the day before the meeting by noon. So there is no proper motion to be able to do this. So you would have to bring a motion in September at the next board meeting in order for the reconsideration motion to then be heard in the following meeting, which would be October.
Part of the issue under Section 50, which is the reconsideration, is that you need to have a motion, either with or without notice, that is tabled before 12 noon preceding the meeting. So we're too late to just raise it here. So you'd need to technically bring a motion returnable to have this thing reconsidered. That motion would have to be brought by someone who voted in favor of the previous motion. That's part of this. And then at that meeting, you need a 2/3 vote in order to then proceed with the matter on the merits at the subsequent meeting, which would be in October. So that's the route. It's a long, circuitous route to go through the reconsideration. I think an option here is to simply have staff report back, and it can be done in a way, I think, that complies with the bylaw, and we can address it at that time in September. That's my suggestion. The reconsideration, I can walk through that step by step, but at the end of the day, it's October before you can deal with it on the merits, and you have to meet all those preconditions, including a 2/3 vote when it comes up in September, and a motion brought by one of the people who was on the prevailing side of the previous motion.
I have one more procedural question. I don't need the answer today, it sounds like, because of the timing issue, which is if we could be provided with a list of the board members who did vote in favor of the original resolution, so those who are in a position to move the motion know who they are. Because I think I'm one of them, but I'd like to verify it.
Okay, so you,
I just want to amend.
no, I think we're finished, so we're moving into committee for questions of staff. So Commissioner Carroll,
So
you would like to ask, okay, I would appreciate it if you put your hand up earlier, because we've moved into committee now. So go ahead. So, sorry, he would like to ask a question of the deputy.
Through the chair to the deputy.
Yeah.
Is there something that you forgot that you want to add, please?
Just to say that we could try to also at council to make sure that the TTC is reimbursed for any costs, if that is a recommendation that could also be done at council.
Okay, we're in committee now. Commissioner Carroll.
okay, so there is, I mean, we're trying to get this done in a way that's comfortable and procedurally in order. There is a way that makes this a little more expeditious than here in September and then here again in October. But the real reopening that has to happen here, we actually dispositioned this in a TTC item already. what the chair's motion is to request city council to reopen this item. We don't have to wait that long for that. A motion to reopen this item could happen at council in July. Then asking city staff to report to their board, i.e. us, and that would bring it forward to us in September and would allow the staff-to-staff conversation to find some way to accommodate everyone. So perhaps we simply stand our motion down and the motion to reopen can happen directly in council. Because the motion that the chair brings us is to request the city to reopen what they did. And I think we've demonstrated today that they need to anyway, because we, when we had our council hats on, moved a motion on something that had already been fully dispositioned by one of its agencies. And that's the issue here. So we have money that was already designated and dispositioned and voted on by an agency of the city, and then the city moved a motion sending it somewhere else. So the reopening could happen next week in council, and then referring. And I'm seeing Brian nod. So I think that's what's going to happen.
That's what you want to happen.
Was that a question?
Wouldn't you agree? And he did. He agreed silently.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Commissioner McKelvey?
Thank you. What are the timelines for what's happening on this site with Metrolinx and when they'd like to sign their lease? So the lease is between the city and Metrolinx, not the city, not the TTC and Metrolinx. Okay. So in that case, it would seem that the city could direct where these funds are going. That is within their purview if the lease is between the city and Metrolinx.
Under previous changes to the municipal code, effectively, TTC property was determined to be held as an agent for the city, and then it has a process for how you approve if you're going to deviate from that. And if you're going to deviate, you do a joint report, which was the purpose of the February report, which was the deviation from it, to allow the TTC to remain as the landowner for a dollar lease for the nonprofit organization, and then a second parcel you're going to license to Metrolinx. The city, under that provision of the municipal code that says effectively you hold it as agent, is going to sign the license. And the TTC has noted its objection that it's inconsistent with the board's direction from February.
Right. But the lease is between the City of Toronto and Metrolinx. And what was the answer on the timing of this lease?
So they indicated it was imminent, and I know Metrolinx is. And this discussion shouldn't impact the Metrolinx license. It's a question of where the license fee is being allocated.
Correct, but it sounds like the community doesn't want this lease signed until this is ironed out, which makes sense. So if we don't iron this out, then it will delay the lease.
No.
So what are the costs of the TTC moving off-site? And, I don't know why this would be an in-camera thing, like a cost for a move. Like does that really require us to go in camera to divulge the cost for you to move off the site?
The costs that were described in our board report and is being considered by the city through the DAF process has always dealt with the cost of the TTC separately. So that item was always acknowledged as being reimbursed separately by Metrolinx to the TTC to an upset value, and the TTC is comfortable that that amount can be covered by Metrolinx. So the revenue is different from the compensation to relocate the TTC.
So it's already being dealt with separately?
So we are comfortable that the TTC is being appropriately, the costs that we are being incurred to relocate are being addressed. The question is where the revenue from the license is going.
Okay, and then instead of reopening this issue today as our recommendation, I just want to make sure, or maybe this is a question of the movers, because it sounds like Councillor Carroll is going to move something. But it is within our purview and our ability today to just recall this motion altogether and not vote on it. Okay. That correct? We can do that? That's in our purview? Okay.
February. Any other questions of staff? So I'll ask a couple. So this was fully supported by this body in February, and the concept was to reimburse and compensate the TTC, even though the lands were going, and that was a huge, I think, gift, the big property for affordable housing. My understanding is there was compensation for the costs associated with this, and I won't cite the number, but that was basically agreed upon by all the parties involved, by Creatio, Real Estate Services, Metrolinx, et cetera. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so the TTC needs the money in part to offset some of the costs involved in this process, facilitating this process.
Madam Chair, the way the agreement's structured, TTC is being compensated for its moving costs separately from the license funds.
Okay, so I guess maybe we have to be careful what we're saying here because it's confidential, so I won't pursue that any further. The concept was, though, that if we go down this road of, I guess I'll refer to the members' motion that was a walk-on item at the last council meeting, very late in the agenda, and my understanding is the motion that was placed by the councillor as a walk-on item had no reference to Metrolinx or the TTC. There was no mention of Metrolinx or the TTC in this motion that was placed before council as a walk-on last-minute item.
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
So would this then, in that case, be even in order? Should council have voted on this when all the information was not before council?
Madam Chair, I don't believe that TD staff is in a position to comment about a city process.
Answer that. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Thank you very much for those answers that you could provide. Let's move to speakers.
Provide?
Commissioner Lalonde.
I had one simple question.
Okay, go ahead.
As a speech, if you want me to.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Do I understand this right, that if we reallocate the revenue from this lease to some other party, it just means the city's going to have to give more money to the TTC to fund our deficit? Is that the bottom line issue? That if we lose one source of revenue, it has to come from somewhere, and it's going to come from the city? So that if the city voted to give this revenue somewhere else, they should have voted at the same time to give an equivalent amount to the TTC in form of increased subsidy. Isn't that the bottom line?
We'll end up in fare increases.
Well, one or the other.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm suspecting that when council voted to give the money somewhere else, they didn't think they'd have to replace that money with funds to the TTC.
That was a question.
Oh. Right, okay.
That was a last-minute addition. Okay, I think Commissioner Osborne had a question as well.
Mine sounded very, very similar to the question that was just asked, so I think we're fine. Thanks.
You'll leave it at that. Okay, let's move to speakers on this item. Commissioner Carroll.
Okay, so I'll go first because I am a seconder of the motion. Some form of reopening has to happen here because this is not a habit we want to be in, where we negotiate something, we disposition it in an agency of the city, and then the city moves another motion that doesn't mention that a previous disposition has been taken. And so that's something we always want to clean up. That being said, I do have a tremendous amount of sympathy for the community here. It just, the issue of how we're going to help that community is a conversation we ought to have been included in. Because it's revenue we were, having received it, now counting on. And so something has to be worked out. It has to be worked out in a way that does not jeopardize any of the extremely legalistic components of a real estate transaction that are always, minefields when politicians start doing the backstroke through them. And so I really think that although I seconded this motion, the best thing that we could do is stand down our motion, not actually vote on it today, not make this request of council yet, but that the people here who can put their councillor hats on should try and address the issue of what we moved in council, not having all the facts before us, and ask staff to do a staff to staff and consulting with all of the politicians, come up with a solution that actually can help the community and help us to stay on our procedural path. That would be my best disposition of what is a really awkward item here. And that we can do in such a way that staff can get on with solving it. We can do it fairly expeditiously, given that we can move the real reopening in the proper venue this very next week. Those are my comments.
Other speakers on this item? Commissioner McKelvey?
So I didn't actually see you put forward a motion on that, though.
No, I was asking is the will of the body that we stand the motion down. I'm not moving another motion. I'm saying we shouldn't actually vote on the item because council actually is seized with the matter as of this motion, but there's some question as to whether or not they're being seized with the matter currently is even in order. That's why I don't want to make more mess here.
Okay, and I would support that, and that instead of us, reversing council's decision and causing that back and forth, that we give an opportunity for it to be sorted on the other end. So I would support that if that's moved forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be interested in what other commissioners feel on this item. No, he's not saying staff report. She's saying go to council next week. Mm-hmm. No, we could send it next week to July. July, we have a council meeting next week.
No, I know, but I'm suggesting.
Oh, when it comes, oh, I see, okay.
It might supersede whatever decision we make today. I make a decision to allow an option, a decision-making option that we won't otherwise have. So that's my view.
We should take some position. Let's go back to TTC.
I just think this is a superfluous motion because whatever the TTC decides, it doesn't matter because it still has to come before council, and whether, this council still has to decide on it, and it still has to be brought forward and notice a motion. It still needs 2/3 to get on the floor, and there still needs to be debate. The fact that this is here in front of us doesn't really mean anything. What would mean more is if it came on the floor of council at some future meeting with a report from the TTC recommending one way or the other. So so if you said you were looking for opinions, I think I think there would be value in withdrawing the motion as it doesn't really achieve anything that you want to achieve.
Okay, so what the clerk's saying is a motion to receive. We'll basically do the same thing. Or did you want to direct it to
Can I make a
council?
subsequent comment?
Sure.
I think that Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong is right. when I say stand down, I'm using the wrong words, and I probably confused you. I meant withdraw. As the mover, if you withdraw the motion, because if we receive it, or if we vote on it, we appear to be taking a position on it, when in fact, it's too soon to be taking a position. We should be moving the reopening in council. So I think what the deputy mayor is getting at, using the word withdraw is less confusing than what I said, but he's absolutely right in my view. Somebody write that down. I 100% agree with Deputy Mayor Minawang.
There'd be no record that this even transpired, because the motion that was moved at council as a member's motion, walk-in item at the tail end of council, had no reference to Metrolinx or TTC. So this body, this was actually, TTC staff alerted me to this. Nobody caught it at council because it didn't have all the information in there. It was really, did not really speak to the real issue. So I'm happy to withdraw. But I do think we should stand behind our decision, simply because this is a huge property that we're transferring to become affordable housing, and there's costs associated with that. And I would call us cash strapped, quite frankly. And quite frankly, I'm not so thrilled about fare increases, and this is a sizable amount of money. So I hope this ends up being a good news story, or the right story for us, because all the bodies and all the stakeholders were involved in negotiations and meetings, as I've cited now 3 times, and this was the outcome and the decision. So somehow we're I don't want to feel like we're backtracking on this. I wouldn't want this to become a precedent. And as you know, we face a lot of financial pressures, tough the past year with the Presto implementation. Fare evasion is a $60 million plus problem. Now the discounted double fare, what are we going to do with that? And I certainly don't, I'm not thrilled about any service reductions or fare increases. So this is a significant amount of money, and I think we should tread lightly and carefully on this, because it was reviewed by this board in February and agreed upon as part of the earlier negotiations by all the parties. So I hope we can stay the course on this, but I'm happy to withdraw my motion at this time. So we don't need to vote, I think, do we? Or do we have to vote to withdraw? No? No, okay. We don't need to vote. So I think that brings us to the end of our meeting, timely way. So thank you, everyone, and we are now adjourned. We don't really need a motion to adjourn, do we?